Well, I certainly hope that they'll bring out some surprises, otherwise it'd make a very dull day for all of us and a very dull reading for the next day as well. I think that the secret of producing good newspaper is being able to celebrate and enjoy the surprises. And yes, you can prepare for surprises, but you need to be it's like being ready for the unexpected. And that's a large part of my job in terms of preparing the coverage ahead of time. What we want is a large group of qualified journalists who have knowledge of what might come up, prepared for the unexpected, and be well briefed by people in the industry and lobby groups surrounding them. So yeah, I want surprises. The reason budget exists and pre-budget reports exist is for the government to update us on what they think that the growth forecasts are going to be, what their spending is going to be, what their debt levels are going to be, all of which is pretty hard-headed and important information, but not terribly accessible to the broad mass of readership. So on the one hand we have that and an obligation to do that properly and thoroughly. The temptation which will be irresistible, I think, is to do the sort of more interesting stuff, which may be a bit more marginal.
I think his wiggle room is extremely restricted at the moment because, of course, we've seen the IMF now tell us that we're going to see an 11% of GDP deficit next year. The debt levels, while they're not going to be anywhere close to what they were post-World War II, they are still going to go up very substantially. We're spending a lot of money recapitalising banks. It's very limited what they can do. And I think more likely, rather than spending a lot of money, is that they probably will announce some tax changes, they'll announce some spending changes, but they will be offset in other parts of the budget. So you will get your headlines, but you won't get a big rise in overall spending. And if you look back in previous recessions, unemployment has risen between around about 1.5 and 2 million people. There's a limit to how much the government can do to offset that. Economic growth or contractions at these sort of rates are consistent with unemployment rising by at least the same as they have done in previous recessions, if not more. And I think you will see a very significant rise. It's probably going to go over 3 million over the space of this year. And of course, the good thing is that we have very strong automatic fiscal stabilisers. In other words, people will be able to take on benefits and they'll be paying a lot less taxes.
The tensions that exist between a Chancellor and the Prime Minister are always heightened during the time of the budget. The Prime Minister always wants bells and whistles and some whiz-bangs to give to the media, and the Chancellor, generally speaking, is much more cautious. This time around, because this budget is so important, I think those tensions are being exacerbated. And the tensions between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are not helped by the briefing that's been going on around the Chancellor and his job from allies of the Prime Minister. So at the very time when the Chancellor has to be concentrating on this extremely important budget, there is speculation about his job. There is speculation that the Prime Minister's favoured Lieutenant Ed Balls is angling for that post, and this is extremely unhelpful. The question of George Osborne and what he has to offer is an extremely interesting one at this time. It strikes me that he has very few ideas. It also strikes me that this is entirely intentional. It would be crazy for the Conservative Party to posit lots and lots of proposals at this point, especially as they will have, if they get into power, several years where they have to manage a very difficult economic situation. It's my personal feeling that the Conservative Party should be a little bit more honest about their position, that without saying that they are the do-nothing party, they could say that in fact the situation is a global situation. There is very little individual governments can do. What they will do is manage this as best they can and make things as good as they can be for the people who suffer as a result of the economic downturn.
If there's one thing that the last couple of years has has demonstrated very clearly, it is the closely interlocked nature of the global economy. For a company like us operating in more than 50 countries worldwide, the UK budget, the actions of the UK government are clearly very, very important. This is our base after all. But they have to be seen in a context where the actions and the decisions made by central banks and governments in other countries are also very, very important to us. Global coordination between governments, between regulators, between central banks is clearly of vital importance to the world economy. It's one of the things that's been abundantly clear in the recent period, is that when governments and the authorities act in concert, they have far more impact, and that when they act individually, there can be occasions when their actions are kind of dissipated by the nature of the global world.